Alright, you guys, so this is the part that you've been waiting for. The issues that I've had with Ash's Pokemon Journeys team. There are a lot of them, but I tried to be as objective as possible. So, without any further ado, let's get into this. Alright, you guys, so now let's talk about the section that a lot of you have been commenting on the last video, and that is Ash's Journeys team. Now, I had some strong opinions about certain characters, and we're going to get into those. But we're going to talk about his individual team members at this point. And we're going to go from the ones that I have the least opinion on to the ones that I have the strongest opinion on. And I know a lot of you feel like I didn't clarify things in the last video, and that was completely intentional. Because let me tell you, there's certain reasons why I don't think Ash should have caught in certain Pokemon. And there's certain reasons why I feel like other Pokemon should have been more of the spotlight, should I say? But anyway, why don't we get into this part of the discussion? Because you're going to see exactly where my brain has been going over the last 2 years in the Journeys anime. For starters, we're going to list Pikachu. This one is a pretty basic choice. Pikachu should always be there. It's Ash's original Mon. It's been on every journey with him. There's not really any reason why it shouldn't be there. But the primary reason it should be there is because something that they've established that Ash can do that most other trainers, especially in the Masters 8, can't. And it's the fact that Ash is a wielder of every mechanic that's come out from Gen 6 to Gen 8. And what I'm talking about here is the ability to use Z moves. Pikachu has its own exclusive one in 10 million volt Thunderbolt. And that's the reason why Pikachu should be on this team. If you're playing into the thought process that Ash has this infinity gauntlet of extra mechanics that the Pokemon world has gained over the last generation or 2 or 3, then Pikachu is obviously a choice that should be on his team, considering it's the only individual on Ash's team that can actually use that mechanic. So it's a no-brainer. Pikachu should be here. Now, let's get into one of my least favorite members of Ash's team, Sirfetch'd. I personally don't have anything against Sirfetch'd as a Pokemon. I think it's really cool that they decide to give a regional variant to a Pokemon that was really considered just a jokemon back in Gen 1, and they also offered it the ability to get an evolution. With that being said though, I don't really feel like it adds any dynamic to Ash's team. It's really just fallen victim to the cookie cutter formula of it's strong in the wild and it likes to battle, so Ash has to capture it, which is really sad when you think about it. Because that's something that they've really replayed over the last couple of generations. I mean, think about it, okay? You have Hawlucha. Hawlucha was one of these things. It was the strongest in the forest, and then it decided to join Ash because Ash beat it, and Ash helped it grow stronger, which is fine. But when you compare Hawlucha to Galarian Farfetch'd and their dynamics, Hawlucha is just the better candidate there. So it could have been where Ash has Hawlucha on his team. I honestly don't really feel like it got as much time as it deserved in the Kalos anime. Unfortunately, a lot of Ash's Kalos Mons, they really took a back seat when it came to Greninja. They had their own individual arcs, but this could have been the time to really start bringing back some of those older Mons that could use a little bit more development, or not even development, just screen time. Or you could even go the route of something that's been neglected. How about Scraggy? Yeah, Scraggy didn't get as much as development. It really got the Fampy treatment to where it hatched kind of late. It didn't really get the growth that it could have gotten. And unfortunately, there was no Battle Frontier-esque arc that happened after Unova for Scraggy to really grow in until we got to Journeys. That would have been the perfect time to do this. And we could have seen Ash get that evolution for Scraggy into Scrafty. And I am a personal fan of Scrafty, and I would really like to see Ash, complete that circle. But instead, we got a regional variant, which, don't get me wrong, I am a huge fan of Ash having a regional variant. I think he should have gotten one while he was in Alola, but he didn't, and that's for a different video. But my point is a regional variant of a type that Ash has kind of been oversaturated with in the last couple of generations, and it is already kind of something that he's had on other teams, really isn't that impressive. If they wanted to go the regional variant route, they should have given Ash a Galarian Ponyta. The reason for it is because it covers the 2 type bases that Ash doesn't have in Psychic and Fairy, just like I talked about in the other video. But it also would have added a whole nother bit of dynamic to Ash's battle style, because he's no longer going to be able to use the brute force approach, which is very important for when you're talking about a world championship run. And unfortunately, that's really all Galarian Surfetched is good for, which is kind of sad when you think about it. Alright, now let's talk about one of my more favorite members of Ash's team, but I feel was horribly misrepresented. Dracovish. Now, Dracovish is an interesting case, because it is the first fossil that Ash has ever had in the anime, which is really, really cool when you think about it. And not only that, but it's typing that it doesn't have the rock. Instead, it's got dragon water, which I found really interesting when I first did my playthrough of Sword and Shield. But with that being said, let's just talk about the absolute powerhouse that this thing is. I mean, it's a monster when you talk about competitive play for the games. And not only that, but just its overall stats is pretty impressive as well. But now let's talk about it in the anime. I understand that the anime is targeted towards kids, and I get that. And in every generation, you have your Jokemon. I mean, let's be real. Gen 1, I mean, it was kind of just a mixture of everything because they really didn't know what they were doing. Gen 2, it was Totodile. Gen 3, Torkoal. Gen 4, you're looking at Gibble. Gen 5, I mean, in reality, you can look at Oshawott, you can look at Scraggy. Gen 6, same deal. It was more of a serious tone, but you still had your individual moments, kind of like Gen 1. And then Gen 7, you have Rowlet. And of course, in Gen 8, they're going to do the same thing with Dracovish. Unfortunately, I don't feel like they demonstrated it to be the powerhouse that it truly is. It has its wins, but it's not really the intimidating monster that it could be. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this should be Ash's ace of this generation, but what I am saying is kind of like the battle with Cynthia that's going on right now. There's just certain Pokemon that you identify with her. Spiritomb, Lucario, Garchomp. And when you talk about Cynthia, those are usually the 3 that come up in conversation. Dracovish should be the same way with Ash, but it's really not. It hasn't stood out enough to solidify itself as a battler. And you could still do that with it being the comedic relief. I mean, unfortunately, they're just kind of rewashing the whole, hey, I want to bite on your headline like Gibble. And it's sad. I mean, I understand that that's really all Dracovish can do, but come on. You could have done more with my boy. Because, in all honesty, I really love this Pokemon. I love him in the anime, and I love him in the games. For different reasons. But, still, this should have been one of those 3 Mons on Ash's Journey team that really strikes fear into the heart of his opponents. Because they know at any point, this thing could come out and start leveling their team. Alright, now let's talk about one of the catches that Ash shouldn't have had, in my opinion. Dragonite. Now, don't get me wrong. I fully recognize that Dragonite is one of those iconic Pokemon, and a lot of people love it. But the fact of the matter is that Ash's Dragonite, even though it had an impressive battle record, doesn't really feel special. It doesn't feel like a pseudo-legendary. You guys know what I'm talking about. A pseudo-legendary takes the stage, and it's just imposing. Everybody knows that this thing is in a clear class of its own, set somewhere between a regular Pokemon and a legendary Pokemon. Let's take, for instance, Cynthia's Garchomp, or Steven's Metagross. Those are prime examples. You know clearly that these things are the ace of the trainer. And I fully recognize that Pikachu is supposed to be the clear ace, while Dragonite is supposed to take a backseat. And that's just the problem. Ash met Dragonite as a Dragonair on the island full of Dragonairs in the episode with Go when they were out traveling. While this Dragonair was having trouble flying, Ash did his thing that he does best. He bonded with it, and it ended up evolving into a Dragonite to save him, and then it joined Ash. While that's cool and all, that's not really growth you get to see in a character. Unfortunately, the only real growth that it had was trying to get it to enjoy battling like Ash does, which when you think about it was kind of backwards. Ash had used it, and he had already, accomplished a little bit of things with it, and then it has its moment with Iris, which I get that Iris is some sort of dragon prodigy, and she has a way with reaching them in ways that even their own trainers can't, but that takes away from the development that it could have with Ash. And the fact that it's already in its final stage, it also cuts the runtime of that development, which is really sad because it's hard for us as fans of the show or people watching and get invested with the stories of the individual characters, which in Ash's case, for his team, they're all individual characters. It's hard for us to stay invested with them. Even hard for us to want to be invested with them, which is sad. And not only that, but let's talk about the fact that it's a pseudo-legendary, and it was more along the lines of reduced to the flyer of this gen, which is sad when you think about it. There's that shot where it's training with Ash's other flying types at Professor Oak's lab, and I mean, I'm sorry, but it's a pseudo-legendary dragon type. The things that Dragonite should be battling with are Charizard, Infernape, Crocodile, the 3-stage evolutions that are powerful, that could match it because they have the battle experience, they have the size, and they also have the speed. But unfortunately, it was just forced to take a back seat. And not only that, but let's talk about something that I alluded to in the last video. The fact that because of Dragonite's growth, it really isn't easy to get invested in the character. But there was something else that Ash had that we could have got invested in, that he got little to no time with. And, oh yeah, it's also a pseudo-legendary. How about Gibble, the Pokemon he caught between the 7th and the 8th gym in the Sinnoh region? The Pokemon that we got invested in, that we got to see it develop Draco Meteor, but that was it. And I understand that there's an argument that could be made for a lot of Ash's Mons not wanting to evolve, which is fine. But that argument can't be made with Gibble for one simple reason. It didn't have the time to show us that it didn't want that treatment. You could make that argument with Squirtle. You could make that argument with Bulbasaur because it actually chose. You could make that argument with Bayleaf, with Totodile. You could make that argument with, I don't know, let's say Corphish, Weasel. Any one of the ones that Ash's other Mons that didn't evolve, but they had a prolonged time in the season to show us that it wasn't something that they were really interested in, even if they never said it. Gibble, on the other hand, we got the development for Draco Meteor, and then after that, it lost to Darkrai. And it's just been chilling at Oak's lab ever since. Which is a true shame, because it could have been a really good powerhouse on Ash's Journey's team, even if it was just rotated out from here and there. But at least we were invested with this character, and we could get to see it grow into possibly a Garchomp. Now, let's talk about our boy Gengar. I love Gengar. Gengar to me is probably the greatest ghost Pokemon that I've ever had the ability to play through any type of run in any type of gen. I don't know what it is about this thing, but I always love playing with it. And it always takes me back to Ash when he caught his Haunter. Yeah, he didn't really get to keep it, but the fun that it got to have, and the fun that the Ghastly and the Gengar that hang out with it got to have, it just struck me as the type of Pokemon, even though it was mischievous, it just liked to have a good time. That's one of the things I've loved most about Gengar. Unfortunately, though, it falls prey to a lot of the problems that some of Ash's other Pokemon have for this Journey team, like Dragonite. It being fully evolved when Ash caught it. Now, I understand that they did this because they had the problem of time on their side. They really needed to squeeze a lot with the whole Journey's theme, which is the exact problem with Gengar. What I'm getting at is this, and I talked about this previously in the other video briefly, but the fact of the matter is, this is the 8th gen of the anime, which means we should be focusing on the new mechanic, which is Dynamax and Gigantamax. Gengar being the Pokemon on Ash's team that wields this mechanic because it has an exclusive Gigantamax form is what's important here. Because it has the ability to Gigantamax, it should have been the focus of Ash's team. Hell, I would have even said it should have been the ace of Ash's Journeys Pokemon that he caught, which in terms means that he shouldn't have caught it as a Gengar. It should have been a Ghastly, which unfortunately gave it the short end of the stick, because they also just rewashed the Charizard storyline in another generic form. It's abandoned by its trainer because it's weak or it keeps having problems, and then Ash finds it, thinks it's cool, captures it, and then it gets its redemption a little bit later. It's sad, really. And I would have been much more favorable for that storyline if it was a Ghastly, not a Gengar, because then we would have got to see it grow with Ash, and that would have in turn allowed it to roll its original trainer into another problem that this series has been having: the World Coordination event. I don't understand why they didn't allow Gengar's trainer to be part of it, because if it was a Ghastly, then they could have had a nice training arc to where they could show how it's continuously getting stronger, and they could show it evolve into a Haunter, it gaining power, and then eventually overcoming and allowing Gengar to get the win, to clinch Ash not only an important win, but maybe an upgrade in the class system for the coordination events, which would have really made us be invested as viewers, which unfortunately we didn't get. And like I said in the last video, I struggle to remember a battle where Gengar was really relevant. It has a couple of things here and there, and then it has its brief, very brief training arc with Alistair, which is tragic when you think about it, because it's the Pokemon that can use the new mechanic, and Alistair would be the perfect one to show Ash how to do it, considering he has a Gigantamax Gengar of his own. And just think about it. Ash, even though he's a champion, is training with an elite level gym leader, and then they have to have a battle in the World Coordination event. And it comes down to master versus pupil. Who's stronger? That would have been much more interesting to watch than what we got. And I'm sorry to say that Gengar just falls flat. And it's hard to get invested in a character that lacks development, especially when it should have been the main focus of this generation. And we're going to talk about the reason why Gengar and the rest of Ash's Journey's Pokemon fell so flat with the final member of his team, and the one that I seem to have triggered a lot of people with. Alright, now it's time for the explanation that you've all been waiting for. The reason why I think Ash shouldn't have caught Lucario. Now, I'm going to need you guys to look at this with an unbiased opinion, no matter how much you like Lucario, or no matter how much you guys think that Lucario was fan service. Okay? Because this is the direction that I'm approaching it at. Now, let's get into the actual journey of Lucario. According to Bulbapedia, Lucario started out as an egg in the Sinnoh region and was fumbled from person to person until it made its way to Vermilion City. And then it sensed Ash, pulsated, hatched into Riolu, and then they became friends. It was immediately clear that Lucario was going to be the ace of Ash's journey's expeditions from the time it was a Riolu. They put majority of the focus on its training. Between B, it evolving, battling Mewtwo, going to Master Mega Evolution, going back to battle Karina, and then finally it mastering Mega Evolution and toppling B's Machamp. Now, with that being said, that is spread out over a lot of journeys. And unfortunately, it's a waste of time. The reason why it's a waste of time is because you are trying to master a mechanic that Ash has already mastered. Or should I say, done a lot of work in. Now, you may be wondering what I'm talking about this. Some of you may already know what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to say it. Ash Greninja. That is a fan favorite. Me, personally, I love Lucario as a Pokemon. I played it with my first playthrough of Diamond and Pearl way back in 2007. I still use it today. But the problem is this is not Kalos. This is not Gen 6. This is Gen 8. So why are we focusing on a mechanic that Ash has already done the work for? Now, I know a lot of you are upset with how they wrote off Ash Greninja in the Kalos anime. And I'm one of those people. Yes, it's got to go fight these roots that are going to destroy the world and everything like that. Which is fine, because you needed to write him off for Alola. I completely understand that. Okay? Which I think it was a mistake in the way they ended things, because the roots thing is kind of dumb, in my personal opinion. And that's not trying to take it from an unbiased stance. That's just me saying it. But Journeys was their chance to bring back Ash Greninja. And the fact that they waited and waited and waited until Lucario had gotten its Mega Evolution is the problem. They were trying to put off Ash Greninja as long as possible. And even in the fights with the lawn that they flash back to, they didn't even put Greninja in its Ash Greninja form. They just said it fought Charizard and Mega Charizard X as Greninja, which is really, really sad. Ash Greninja is supposed to be the ultimate Mega Evolution. And I'm sorry to say, but no matter how good Mega Lucario is in the anime for Ash, Ash Greninja will always be better. The problem with Ash Greninja is that it's still unfinished. And you guys may be asking what I mean by that. Well, let's dive into Mega Evolution as a whole. Beside me, you're going to see both Lucario and you're going to see Greninja. Both of these are Ash's Pokemon. Both of them have the ability of some form of Mega Evolution. Now, what I need you guys to realize is there's one thing that Lucario has that Ash Greninja does not. And it is, in fact, a Mega Stone. And Ash also has a Keystone to go along with this Mega Stone. But with Ash Greninja, he does not. So, let's think about this in terms of transfers of energy. Think about it as a circuit breaker on your house. Energy is controlled through that circuit breaker. It allows a certain amount to go through at a certain amount of time, and it regulates the amount that goes through. With that being said, we can say that a Keystone and a Megastone are the same things. Conduits that allow you to flow the control of energy from point A to point B, or Ash to Lucario while they're in the Mega Evolution. Now, while this does make the Mega Evolution more stable, it does not make it more powerful. Now, let's go over to Greninja. Ash and Greninja do not have this. It is a raw transformation. The two are exchanging emotion and energy between them. And because there's no conduit to regulate the flow, it is just one continuous feedback. Now, when you look at it like that, you have to install some sort of mechanism to help with it. And we saw this in the Kalos anime. After they lost to Wolfric, and Ash and Greninja went through this epic training arc to help master the transformation so that they can stabilize it. But that was the last bit of training they really had. Just the stabilization. Okay? It wasn't really a mastery. And I would say that the person who is at fault here is Ash, not Greninja. You see, we've seen in battles time and time again that Greninja in this form is extremely more powerful than other Mega Evolutions. The problem is the feedback with energy. When Ash gets exhausted, the transformation fades. Think of it like they're burning through their power source too much. I would even liken it to the fact that they're using Greninja's Torrent ability to just get to that next stage of evolution temporarily. The problem is that if the two ends that are receiving the power are not of equal quality, then at some point, one's going to get overloaded. And in this case, it's Ash himself. So instead of giving Ash this new Riolu that he has to start over with the mechanic he's already used, and he has to go through, and he has to train and do all the stuff that he's already done in a previous generation, why don't we bring back Ash Greninja earlier and have them master the transformation? Have Ash himself go through an intense training regimen. Greninja's been training non-stop, battling these vines for the last generation and a half. But Ash's bond has probably weakened with it because he hasn't been exposed to the feeling of the transformation. Which means that them giving him Lucario is a lazy way to give us fan service and also not bring back something that can, let's be honest, probably sweep the Masters 8. And in all honesty, I would have rather seen Ash Greninja than Lucario. I understand that them giving Lucario was fan service. And don't get me started on the fact that Ash should have already had a Lucario, okay? We should have gotten it in Diamond and Pearl or in Kalos. And they missed those boats, but what we got was generally better because we got Ash Greninja out of it and we also got Infernape. That's why we didn't get Lucario in those generations. But besides the point, the fact that Ash already has a Mega Evolution that's just on standby, kind of hanging out, doing its own thing, I don't understand why they didn't bring it back. And like I said in the previous video, the anime is literally called Journeys. It's perfectly believable that Ash could run into Greninja in the wilds of Kalos, as long as they let him go to Kalos. Which, we'll talk about that in the location section. But the point is instead of wasting an entire season and a half trying to develop a mechanic that isn't the main mechanic of this generation, why not just bring back the Pokemon that he has already done the work with and polish it off, so that way we can focus on the main mechanic of the generation in Gengar, because Gengar is what should have been developed due to it having the Gigantamax phenomenon. This is why I think they really dropped the ball with Ash's team. If you look at it from what I've said so far and the time that was wasted on certain things, it's really tragic. Pikachu is Ash's Z-move user. It doesn't need any development. Greninja could be Ash's Mega Evolution, and all you really have to do is polish it off and strengthen the bond and strengthen Ash. And then that form would be nigh unstoppable. Then let's talk about Gengar. Gengar is the one that would get the development that Riolu had. It would get the training arcs, and it would get the rivalries, and it would get the development into the new mechanic. Now, if you look at it from that point of view, that leaves 3 open spots from Ash's team. And if I'm being honest, those spots could have been filled with a combination of regional variants that we've already talked about, or rotation for older Pokemon that still need development. 3 spots you can do a lot with. But the key point is Ash has access to 3 mechanics, 2 of which are exclusive to him because he's the only one in the Pokemon world that currently has access to him. Which means those last 3 on his team could have been used to bring back fan favorites. Now, if you approach it from that point of view, the fan service would have gone through the roof because now you've brought back Ash Greninja. You have a fan favorite in Gengar who's learning the new mechanic. Pikachu is just there because it's Pikachu. And then you get to see all of Ash's old Pokemon that people are invested in. You get to see new Pokemon that Ash has caught. Dracovish, Surfetched, even if you want to keep him. Then he doesn't have the overlapping of the fighting type. Gibble can get development. Scraggy can get development. Hell, you could even throw Dragonite on it if you just feel like he needs a new pseudo-legendary. That's fine. But the point is the other Pokemon that Ash caught could have gotten better development. And unfortunately, because Ash had to waste all of this time developing a mechanic that he already had, everything else kind of fell flat. That's my frustration with Lucario. That's why I think Lucario shouldn't have been caught. Because they were just treading old water. And unfortunately, Ash shouldn't have had to do that. We're past the point to where Ash needed to master Mega Evolution. And that's all we had for this portion of the Problems with Journeys video. That will bring the character section to an end. Now, what did you guys think about this? How do you feel about my opinions on this entire thing so far? Let me know in the comments down below, because I definitely feel that things could have been a lot different than the way we got. But with all that being said, it's time to sign out the video the best way we know how, by thanking the sponsors. Silverheart Soul, Robert, Vegito Gaming 78, Andrew McCartney, Hollisif, Julian Rodriguez, Ruben Watson, Lord Explosion Murder, Assassin 139, Flyer 943, Shadow Dragon, Tavern Landlord, K McKnight, Kevin Atran, Drax, Truevolt, Adrian Carr, Dino King, Dalen Silva, Fox King, Dalian Petit, Warren E. Taylor, Plus Ultraman, Megar, Mike Logan, Team Valor, Kendall Green, Earth Dragon, John Larson, Alex Horsey, Forbidden Super, and Dylan Nicholson. Thank you all very much, and I will see you in the next video.